lines written on Dom Damian's stone at the Sacro Eremo of Camaldoli. My father, my dear father, dear, dear friend, the paper that here speaks rests on thy rest of deeply buried silence. Here doth end what can here begin, if but be blessed the prayers I, kneeling, pray on thee to pray. O little word, did e'er 7 strokes so hurt the heart of sighing man? We pass this way to where thou art but once. This fair white skirt that still protects Cistercian peaceful days, will it soon change its form? The time is short, it was for thee. One day, one way, thy ways for e'er and e'er confined. 'Twas but as naught, the whim that passed thy head, yet clung and clung, ere it passed its way, and left one sweet song sung. Others written the following morning against a stone of his doorway. Did e'er 4 walls hold such a heavy weight of emptiness? O sacred earth that bore the prints of sacred feet, O yawning gate whose eyelids were so sealed, did ye of yore know aught of what ye sheltered, what ye nailed? The sound of isolation laps mine ears, as it did thine, O poltergeist, here railed by 1 small inch of thickness, from the years that could have passed hereby without such pain. For pass they did, and pass they could but do, e'en as for others they did pass, and gain as they will pass by all who are passing. O huge little wall, when we have passed, what then wilt know? One past wilt be. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. In another passage, the Lord has this powerful saying, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Abundance contains 2 roots, ab, from, and unda, wave. It is the overflowing. And it is a part of life that one observes that over a period one susses out something of the interiority of a person from what is willy-nilly coming to the surface.
we emit our interior. It is enough to be with a person for a while to have some idea of his interior through its manifestations. E.g., we notice a certain person talks willingly about one thing rather than another, and he will return to it frequently. So that is his centre of interest. The Lord goes on to point out that the treasure is the centre of attention of many people. He is speaking this in the context of eternity and reminding us in his own terms of the truth of our own saying here in Ireland, there are no pockets in a shroud. He, in this sermon, is inviting to beatitude on the level of the soul, free from clutter, free from contamination from what is going to pass, free from being in bondage to what is less than itself. The poor in spirit are those who are not cluttered, not dependent. They own nothing and have no illusion of it owning anything. They are free to take off. The lamp of the body is the eye. This, in our day, is more relevant than we think. Much of the time of humankind in the civilized world is focused on a new kind of lamp, but the eye is the organ that is at work. I'm talking about all the life of mankind in the Western world that is attached to some screen or other, be it in one's pocket or on a stand. It is essentially the eye taking in. And this truth which the Lord goes on to point out is extremely true in our time. It follows that if your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. Translate. If I look at an edifying YouTube carefully chosen, I have by the end acquired in a short time a great amount of well-filtered and prepared mental energy and nourishment. I am lifted up by a good chosen piece of information. Or I sit passively and take in whatever may be on the gadget. The average background television in a family in Ireland is just on. Garbage coming at the mind, heart and soul. But if your eye is diseased, your whole body will be all darkness. If one is, as many people are, and not just young people, willingly finding one's consolation and therefore one's treasure in, for instance, the realm of the dark, e.g. pornography in its various manifestations, or eroticism, whatever it might be, or even worse, there's no need to go into detail, then there is real darkness in that person's soul. And if, for instance, in this point in Irish history, the very thought of normalising something which is topsy-turvy has been so easy, it's because by now, from an early age, people growing up are given to understand that certain things are a natural orientation that they have acquired by the very right of being born such, and therefore they have their rights. Never, or hardly ever, is the truth heard that actually by giving that alternative as a norm, one is creating an extra percentage of people who will opt for it, who, had they been warned, would not have had that orientation. It's something that begins to fascinate and then becomes a treasure. In other words, we're creating a problem which need not be there. So, again, where will these people have their consolation? In what gratifies it? Massively out there on these screens, but a lot of these screens also are linked in to the real, that is, people, with whom eventually they will engage. Sometimes physically, other times virtually, because by now there is power to place contacts between souls at a distance which is actually partly virtually physical. It's a new plethora of sinning and behaving which was not there only a few years ago, but it's filling people with a new form of total darkness. The saint of this day, Romuald, was somebody who was called apart, and that meant apart. When he founded a hermitage, he would opt to be recluded in it. That meant that he would not come out, or anyone would come in to his cell. That is still there, potentially, in the Camaldolese life to this day. When I was in formation in France, I had a holy novice master who had been in formation in our charter house with a holy priest. He was our Dom Damien, but he had already, before entering the monastery, been a missionary. He even knew how to fly a small aeroplane. He had to. He'd been touched strongly by grace to orient himself to a completely contemplative life, even though he was a good missionary. And he ended up with us. I didn't know him myself, I only knew about him through my novice master. After about 12 years, therefore he was already fully professed, he was asked by the competent authority to become procurator of a large monastery of the order. It meant going from our place in the south of France to the house in Florence, still there physically, but run by the Cistercians of Casamari by now. And by then he'd had time to reflect, when he got there, on the grace at work in his soul and the reason why he had become a Carthusian already in the first place. He had felt the call to absolute solitude, and he was fairly keen on maintaining it. So he put in a plea. When he got to Florence, he asked if he could stay for a while in the guest house of the monastery before entering the grand cloister or wherever he was going to be put. And then it became manifest what was on his mind. Florence was not far from Camaldoli, the mother house of the Camaldolese, and he was asking to be transferred to the Camaldolese and to become the maximum possible, a recluse. Eventually he obtained what he wished, and he persevered in reclusion until he died in 1960. Some years ago, actually I was still in formation myself in France, at La Trappe by then, but I asked if I could visit Camaldoli, and I was kind of keen on taking his place. I found his cell, where he had lived all those years, and I found his tomb, still there, and his name on it. He'd, of course, changed name in the order of the Camaldolese, taken Girolamo, but there he is, in the graveyard. And I remember praying at the doorstep of his cell, and also at his grave, thinking about time passing, and how he had used to the maximum every second of time, and therefore conquered heaven without a single waste of any energy going in dispersed mode out through the windows of his soul. Nothing would come in but God, and nothing would go out but God. It was not possible at the time, but it came back in this form of the eremitic life through the Bishop of Meath years later. But the essence is the same. that one is precisely making sure that one is not emitting energy in vain or wasting moments in casual use thereof. Yesterday I was called to the bedside of a person younger than myself and a dear friend, and it was quite a shock to the system. She was suddenly taken very ill. So I anointed her, and at the point of anointing one of her hands, we both found that we were actually in tears. It was as though one was also saying goodbye by the hand. It's strange, life. But one sees at the shore of eternity what matters and what matters less. Those who opt to kill time and to dull their conscience and even mind by passive reception of all that comes from a screen will find, when they too are on the shore, that they're leaving time behind, having wasted it to the full. Anointed. Goodbye, sweet smile. Beam onward, 'neath the grave, and dream of little joys that once thee drew. Recall upon an aeon what ours gave. A little while, ere on for air they flew, and from thy rest recall the blessed short day that came and went, ere we e'er thought we'd go so quickly on, upon a germ that lay so calmly in our midst, the door to show. O travel of a journey, no return or ticket of homecoming hold we here, but only onward miles, or miles we learn, not in a page of knowing, holding near, but in a land where no hand evermore shall touch the hand that waved thee from the shore.
No, come on, Snow.
Come on here, come on here.
Sand.
Come on over here. You
Trying
see
to
so
get
the
down.
daisy after
Yeah.
getting cut yesterday.
That's a good girl. Come on, pet. Yeah, that's nice and nice, you guys.
I wouldn't bite you. Well, he would if you held your hand in his mouth, so he wouldn't bite you deliberately, but they're always chewing at something.
God bless these lovely little creatures.
Yeah, the dark cross on both their back, Father.
Oh, a cross on the back.
Yeah, on
See,
both.
there's the cross. See, that's the cross.
The story is that they have the cross because they carried the Lord.
That's right, yeah.
God, no, it's a big cross.
Them are all heifers, replacements for cows. We gotta get around to doing that.
You never saw them before, Father. 5 of them, no less.
We're looking up at the camera.
Spawn, you're on candid camera.
Bud, you're on camera. Bud. Yes. They're about a week old, I suppose, in around a week old.
God bless these little creatures. Oh.
There'll be no mice around now, probably.
Yeah, I think that's the Hebdom. I think he's starting Vespers, isn't he? And they're tuning up for Vespers.
Absolutely. Once they start, there's no stopping.
Yes.